Today I was working on making like a graphic to go with this, like, how do we hold space for bad feelings? And it was kind of blanking to me to create this graphic. I've been having some challenges around that. I've been doing the thing. However, support on that would be greatly appreciated. But on a different note, as I just actually reflect on the subject at hand. I think what is interesting is that I think I do need to take more space and a conscious effort to hold space for this work that I'm doing. Once a good friend of mine, Charlie, had asked on a live that I had with Raheem, where we were talking about these like hardy topics like white supremacy and slavery. They had asked, like, how do you take care of yourselves? What does care look like after these conversations, during these conversations? And I realized I am not always intentional about my rejuvenating care. I kind of just like laugh, because humor is I have a dark humor, I would say. So like sometimes it's nice to make jokes or make light of the situation, even though it's not something to really be made light of. So really like heavy jokes. Watching movies and watching shows sometimes helps. Lately though, I think what's been really helpful is just writing my feelings and thoughts about everything that's happening, about what it is that I'm feeling, why I feel those ways. The first time I started learning about like a wider scope of our history, with like trying to look back in and feel into history with like a historical understanding and letting that influence or like impress upon me. That was probably in college when as I was a sociology major, I was spending so much time learning about structural racism, learning about reading like case studies, having like kind of dialogues, because some people we would engage in particular classes, and other classes we wouldn't engage, but like having these really hearty conversations. I was actually really just overwhelmed during that time and pretty depressed. There was a lot of factors, I think, that feed into why I was depressed. It was like obviously a matter of being in a white space while learning these things, like my whole world kind of falling apart as I'm learning these things, because for the first time I'm looking at blackness in a very different way than I have. I'm identifying with it a lot closer because I grew up with my Taiwanese mom for the most part. So I think in learning a lot about these things, it felt bad because I was like, I didn't know, and I felt like I should have known. It was also like, I wish my family had told me. It was also like, I don't really know what to do with this, right? Because I'm reading these things and I feel horrible, or I feel helpless, and I feel crushed. I feel lost, hopeless, like a lot of these like heavy ass words. And I would say it really was a struggle when I was in college, for sure. Like, and it, so much so that I don't think I ever really dealt with it fully. I just kind of stopped talking as much about it because it was just a very depressing scene for me. Being like constantly trying to raise consciousness and awareness about topics that people don't want to talk about. Constantly talking about history and like the violence that has made up the history. It's just like, it was a lot on my spirit. And I'm in this place now where like I see how easy it is to dive back into it wholeheartedly and get lost, because there's so many things to unpack. Like, because again, I've only spoken really about slavery in America and like white supremacy, which is like huge things, but I'm not even talking about the treatment of other groups and all of these other things. And so what I'm reminding myself is, and something my dad often says is like, remember to like, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to like not think about these things for a little bit. It's okay to, put them down. And I think that's something that's been really helpful, especially when I don't have an answer or a solution, because a lot of the things I'm pondering here, they don't necessarily have solutions. Not clear cut and not super easy, and not just like I can figure it out. So yeah, I think relieving myself of the pressure of having to have the answers or having to be an expert on the topic when I'm not a historian. Like, that's not what I went to school for necessarily. And I haven't studied like texts of different languages and massive amounts of text to call myself a historian. This is just something that I'm really interested in and wanting to like start a conversation about. That's been really helpful too. And also realizing, like, in moments when I feel powerless, I think it's really important to remind myself that I do have power. Remind myself the ways that I do have it and how I can exercise it. So for me, that's like power over my body, power over like what I'm sharing, power in how I choose to respond to how I'm feeling. Because there are days that it's definitely more challenging and like tiring to do the work. This kind of work, and it's also important to let myself chill on those days. So that's kind of what I have in mind as I think about how to deal with these like heavier feelings. And this is just from my personal perspective, obviously. I am going to be doing more active reflecting on like tips I can teach y'all about how to hold space for bad feelings. But really, I think it's often just I think first it's important to let the feeling exist and like let it feel it, not push it away. I think there's been times I've noticed in myself where I'm feeling like disappointed or annoyed or frustrated and being like, why do you feel that way? That's like immediately unproductive versus being like, oh, I feel this way. And acknowledging it has been really important. Like, I feel frustrated, I feel overwhelmed, I feel helpless, I feel powerless. Talking to somebody has been really helpful too. Even just expressing it helps me feel more empowered because I'm able to express. And I guess it's a series of questions, right? Where you're asking yourself, because we hear about sad things and it's like, why do I feel sad? And I think I can kind of get into a over analytical thing. Like, what about this is making me sad? And I think sometimes it doesn't have to be so deep. Like, fucked up things happening to people is saddening. It's hurtful for someone like me who feels very sensitive. Especially as I feel into like the plight of, I don't know, just like large amounts of people suffering. It feels really upsetting for me. Yeah, and I think reminding myself that my sensitivity and my willingness and want to feel into the world and feel into the people around me is a gift. So that's my raw thoughts on the topic.